Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the stellar Nomadus engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The bridge was a cramped affair, lit by the soft glow of holographic displays that flickered with star charts and sensor readouts. Outside the viewport, the void stretched endless, punctuated only by the faint twinkle of the Orion Arm's distant clusters. Ilara's crew was small, her, Jax the engineer, and Mira the avian diplomat from the coalition worlds. 3 souls against the galaxy's indifference, bound by a salvage contract that promised enough credits to keep them flying for a year. Jax leaned over his console, his fingers dancing across the keys with the precision of a pianist. Sensors picking up something odd ahead, cap wreckage maybe? Looks like an old coalition hauler, but it's drifting way off course. His voice carried that easy wit, a grin tugging at his stubbled jaw even as he squinted at the data. Jax was the type who joked through hull breaches, turning panic into punchlines. Mira tilted her head, her iridescent feathers ruffling slightly in the recycled air. She was cautious by nature, her species' long history of interstellar mediation making her weigh every word like a diplomat at a summit. Off course by how much? The last reports from that sector mentioned pirate activity. We should verify before approaching. Her beak clicked softly, a habit when she was thinking. Ilara nodded, her dark eyes narrowing at the viewport. Brave didn't mean reckless. She'd learned that hauling freight through contested space. Helm, plot an intercept course. Jax, run a deep scan. Mira, ping coalition channels for any distress logs. The ship lurched gently as thrusters fired, closing the gap to the anomaly. It was a routine salvage op on paper. Find the wreck, strip what you could, move on. But Ilara felt the familiar knot in her gut. The galaxy had a way of turning routine into ruin. The scan results bloomed on the main holoscreen. A massive freighter, hull scarred by micrometeorites and what looked like weapon fire. No life signs, no power signatures. Jax whistled low. She's a ghost ship, all right. Core's cold, but there's residual energy in the comms array. Like it tried to broadcast something right before going dark. Myra's feathers smoothed, but her eyes, sharp, golden slits, betrayed her unease. Broadcast what? If it's encrypted coalition tech, we might trigger an auto-destruct. Only one way to find out, Ilara said, unstrapping her harness. Suit up. We're boarding. The airlock cycled with a hiss, and the trio floated into the freighter's dim corridors, mag boots clanking against the grated floor. Emergency lights cast long shadows, the air stale and heavy with the scent of burnt wiring. Jax's helmet light swept the walls, revealing faded insignias of the coalition fleet. A bird in flight, wings spread wide. Creepy as hell. Feels like we crashed a funeral. Focus, Mira chided, her voice tinny over the comms. She led the way, scanner and talon probing for traps. Ilara brought up the rear, pulse rifle at the ready. The challenge was clear now. Whatever had silenced this ship could still be active, and with their own vessel tethered by a single umbilical, one wrong move meant drifting forever in the black. They reached the bridge after navigating a labyrinth of jammed doors and sparking panels. Consoles flickered sporadically, and in the center, a lone figure slumped over the captain's station. A coalition officer, feathers matted, eyes frozen in a final stare of horror. Mira gasped, a rare crack in her composure. Elder, save us. What happened here? Jax patched into the comms terminal, his tools whirring. Logs are fragmented, but... got something. An audio file looping. He hit play and a voice echoed through their suits, calm, almost serene in the universal trade tongue. You'll understand soon. The words hung in the air, simple yet laced with an unspoken dread. The loop repeated over and over as if the speaker knew they were coming. Ilara's skin prickled. No coordinates, no warnings, just that sentence haunting the silence. Before anyone could respond, the ship shuddered. Alarms blared in their helmets, docking clamps disengaging. The Nomad was untethering, engines firing on their own. Jax, what the hell? Ilara barked, grabbing the console for stability. Not me, he shouted back, fingers flying. It's the wreck, some kind of override protocol. It's pulling us in. Myra's scanner beeped urgently. Structural integrity failing. Bulkhead sealing. We're trapped. The freighter's lights surged to life, bathing the bridge in cold blue. And from the shadows of the corridor beyond, something moved, a silhouette too fluid, too deliberate. The real challenge had just begun. Elena gripped the armrest of her command chair, the hum of the stellar Nomadus engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with static, the nebulous swirling gases outside painting the bridge in bruised purples and indigos. Jax hunched over the console beside her, his fingers dancing across the holographic controls, sweat beading on his forehead despite the recycled air's chill. "Power surge is stabilizing," he muttered, voice laced with that trademark sarcasm. "But if this glitch doesn't quit, we're flying blind into that gas cloud." Not exactly my idea of a scenic tour. Mira, stationed at the sensor array, shot him a glare from behind her visor. Her cautious nature showed in the way she double-checked every reading, fingers hovering before committing to a tap. "Scenic or not, we can't afford another failure. The colony beacon's our only lifeline back to Earth. If the relays fry again," the ship lurched. Alarms blared, red lights pulsing across the bridge. Elena's stomach dropped as the inertial dampeners stuttered, throwing her forward against the restraints. Jax cursed, slamming an override sequence. "Damn it. The auxiliary core's overloading. That last micrometeor hit must have cracked something." Elena unbuckled, steadying herself as she moved to Jax's side. The nebula loomed larger now, tendrils of plasma reaching out like curious fingers. "Talk to me. Can we reroute?" He shook his head, eyes narrowed at the diagnostics scrolling in fiery script. "Not without venting the excess. But that means losing at least 20% of life support. We push through the cloud like this and we're gambling with hypoxia." Myra's voice cut in sharp and measured. "Sensors picking up anomalies in the nebula, energy signatures that don't match natural plasma. Could be wreckage or worse. If we vent now, we're sitting ducks." Elena's mind raced, the weight of command settling like an old friend. The Nomad was humanity's farthest flung scout, carrying seeds, tech, and dreams to uncharted stars. Losing it meant stranding the advanced team on Epsilon Eridani, no resupply, no word back home. She straightened, decision crystallizing. "Prep the vent. Jax, isolate the core and get us a trajectory through the thinnest part of the cloud. Mira, keep eyes on those signatures. We adapt or we die out here." Jax nodded, his wits subdued by the urgency as he initiated the purge. A low whine built in the hull, the ship shuddering as superheated gases expelled in a brilliant flare. The view screen cleared momentarily, revealing the nebula's heart. Not just clouds but faint, geometric shadows drifting within ruins? Artifacts? The signatures spiked, and Myra's console beeped insistently. "Incoming transmission," she said, her caution giving way to wide-eyed focus. "It's audio only." Garbled but repeating. Elena leaned in as the speakers crackled to life. Amid the static, a voice emerged, not human, layered with alien harmonics that tugged at the edge of comprehension. The words hung in the air, chilling despite the rising heat from the failing systems. Jax exchanged a look with Elena, his usual quip dying on his lips. The shadows in the nebula shifted, resolving into the jagged outlines of derelict vessels, hulls etched with unfamiliar script. Whatever had spoken, it wasn't broadcasting from their logs. And as the Nomad plunged deeper, the transmission looped, insistent, like a promise or a warning. Mira adjusted her sensors, her hands steady now. Multiple contacts closing. "They're not debris, they're active." Elena clenched her jaw, the bridge's lights dimming as power dipped. Their early plan to skirt the nebula had backfired spectacularly. The cloud's interference had masked the approaching fleet until it was too late. Evasive maneuvers. Buy us time. But even as Jax complied, the ship groaned, the alien voice echoing in her ears. Understanding felt dangerously close and not at all welcome. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the console edge as the stellar Nomad shuddered through another gravitational eddy. The ship's alarms had quieted hours ago, but the hum of strained engines vibrated up her spine like a warning. She glanced at Jax, her engineer, who was elbow-deep in an access panel, sparks dancing from his welder. His face, smeared with grease, held that familiar stubborn set, the one that said he'd fix this or die trying. "Status?" she asked, keeping her voice level. No room for panic in the void. Jax wiped sweat from his brow, not looking up. "Hull's holding but the core's overheating. That artifact we snagged from the rim station? It's messing with the inertial dampers. Like it's probing us." He straightened, flexing his calloused hands. "We need to jettison it, Cap. Before it turns us inside out." Ilara's jaw tightened. Jettison the artifact? It was the key to everything, the whisper that had drawn them across 3 sectors. "You'll understand soon," the message etched on its surface, glowing faintly in the cargo hold. Every major power in the galaxy chased echoes of it, from the Krell Dominion to the United Enclaves. Lose it now and they'd be just another crew scraping by on salvage runs. From the NAV station, Mira leaned back, her sharp eyes flicking between readouts. The linguist was the cautious one, always calculating odds, but her fingers drummed a restless rhythm. Probing? That's not tech failure, Jax. It's communication. The patterns match ancient protocols, pre-collapse dialects. If we dump it, we lose the only lead on what soon means. The ship lurched again, harder this time, flinging tools across the deck. Ilara braced against the bulkhead, her mind racing. The rival scavengers they'd evaded at the station were probably closing in by now, drawn by the same anomaly. No backup, no fleet, just them, a battered freighter, and a relic that might unravel the stars or shred their reality. Options? Ilara said, pulling up the schematic. The artifact pulsed on the secondary feed, its crystalline facets shifting like liquid shadow. One image burned in her thoughts, the way it had lit up when Mira first touched it, projecting fractured holograms of forgotten worlds. Jax snorted, slamming the panel shut. Isolated in the hold, reroute power through the auxiliary vents. Risky, could fry the whole grid if it backlashes. But it'll buy time. Mira shook her head, voice edged with urgency. Time for what? We translate wrong and it activates fully. Remember the logs from Epsilon Eridani? Whole colony vanished after a similar signal. Ilara waited, the weight of command settling like lead. Jax's grit had saved them from black holes and blockades. Myra's wit had decoded traps that would bury lesser crews. But this? This was the edge where ingenuity met oblivion. Do it, she decided, nodding to Jax. Mira, keep decoding. If it's talking we listen, but on our terms. As Jax dove back in, the ship groaned, the artifact's glow seeping through the monitors like veins of starlight. Ilara felt the pull, a subtle tug at the edges of her thoughts. The word echoed, not in her ears but deeper, promising truths that could forge empires or fracture souls. Outside, the nebula swirled, hiding pursuers in its folds, and the Nomad pressed on, one fragile fix at a time. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the stellar Nomad's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with static, the nebulous swirling gases painting the bridge in ethereal blues and violets. Beside her, Lieutenant Crix, the avian first officer, tilted his head feathers in agitation, his talons clicking against the console. Captain, the sensors are blind. That pulse from the derelict station, it scrambled everything. We're flying on instruments alone, and they're barely holding. Ilara nodded, her jaw set. She was the grit in this crew's engine, the human who'd pulled them from the jaws of a black market ambush 3 systems back. No speeches, just action. Reroute auxiliary power to the forward arrays. Mira, what's the status on the core? From the engineering alcove, Mira Chen's voice crackled over the intercom, laced with that sharp wit that cut through panic like a laser. Holding, but not for long. The containment field's at 72%. If we hit another anomaly, it'll breach. And trust me, you don't want to be explaining a warp core meltdown to the Galactic Council. The Nomad shuddered as it crested a turbulent eddy in the nebula, the ship listing slightly before stabilizers kicked in. Ilara's mind raced. 3 days ago, they'd answered a distress beacon from this forsaken outpost, only to find it a trap laid by the Vexery raiders. The rival group had stripped the station bare, leaving behind a single ominous transmission looping in every language. You'll understand soon. It had haunted their logs, a riddle wrapped in static, but now it felt like a curse as the nebula closed in, its ionized clouds disrupting their shields. Crix's beak parted in a low trill of alarm. Incoming signatures, 3 Vexery interceptors, closing fast from the port flank. They're masking in the interference. Ilara's fingers flew across the tactical panel, plotting an evasive vector. Humans didn't run from fights, they outthought them. Helm, dive into the dense core. If they want to play hide and seek, we'll make it our game. The ship groaned in protest, acceleration pressing them back as they plunged deeper into the glowing haze. Myra's face appeared on the secondary screen, her dark hair matted with sweat, tools clenched in grease-streaked hands. Captain, that dive's gonna spike the core temp. I can jury-rig a heat sink using the auxiliary thrusters, but it'll mean venting plasma, losing maneuverability for a minute. Do it, Ilara said, eyes locked on the pursuing blips. Crix, arm the disruptors. Target their sensor nodes first. Blind them like they tried with us. The lieutenant hesitated, his cultural aversion to direct confrontation flashing in his wide eyes. But, Captain, the Vexery outnumber us. Their hulls are reinforced, and we're nimble, Ilara cut in, her voice steady as the first laser volley skimmed their shields, bathing the bridge in red light. Trust the plan. Humans built this ship to improvise. As the Nomad twisted through a ribbon of plasma flares, Myra's engineering klaxons blared. She wrestled with the bypass valves, sparks flying from the exposed conduits. The heat built like a forge, but she grinned through the strain. Ingenuity was her trait, the spark that turned scrap into salvation. A final twist of the wrench, and the vents hissed open, expelling superheated gas in a brilliant plume that masked their trail. On the bridge, the Vexery signatures wavered, their formation breaking as confusion rippled through their comms. Elara seized the moment. Now Crix, fire. Disruptor bolts lanced out, precise strikes crippling the lead interceptor's arrays. It veered wildly, colliding with its wingman in a burst of debris. The third peeled off, retreating into the nebula's embrace. But victory tasted bittersweet. As the Nomad stabilized, a new alert pinged. The derelict station signal had latched onto their systems, broadcasting that eerie phrase again, "You'll understand soon," now synced to their own logs, infiltrating every console. Elara leaned forward, pulse steady despite the knot in her gut. The Vexery were gone for now, but the real challenge lingered in the code, a digital ghost promising revelations they weren't ready for. Mira, isolate that signal. Crix, scan for any trace of survivors. We're not leaving until we crack this. The crew moved as one, the nebula's glow fading slightly as they emerged from the core, but the weight of the unknown pressed heavier than any raider's guns. The view screen flickered with the debris field ahead, chunks of shattered hull glinting under the faint light of a dying star. Her crew, small as always, huddled around the tactical console. Mira, the wiry engineer with grease-streaked cheeks and a perpetual squint, and Kale, the alien liaison from the Vexery Collective, his iridescent scales shifting uneasily in the recycled air. "We can't punch through that mess," Mira said, her voice cutting sharp over the alert klaxons. She jabbed a finger at the scan readout, where red blips marked unstable fragments from the derelict station they'd come to investigate. One wrong nudge and we're confetti. Power reserves are at 42% after that last evasion burn. Rerouting AUX to shields buys us time, but not much. Brave didn't mean reckless. She'd learned that hauling cargo through pirate-infested lanes back on the fringes. Options then? Kale, your people map this sector. Any weak points in the field. The Vexery's tendrils twitched, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the screen's glow. He'd been skeptical of humans from the start, too unpredictable, too willing to risk the unknown. The Collective's archives suggest a service conduit ventral side. Narrow, but it threads the debris without collision risk. However, he hesitated, his translator implant buzzing faintly. It leads into the station's core. If the anomaly is active, we expose ourselves. The anomaly. That's what the Galactic Concord called it, a pulsating energy signature that had fried 3 scout ships and whispered that damned phrase across open channels, "You'll understand soon." It haunted comms logs, a calm voice in no known language, promising revelation or ruin. Elara's gut twisted. Humans had heard echoes of it in old Earth myths, but she pushed the thought aside. Focus on the now. Expose ourselves or drift into that rock and become a statistic, she replied, standing to pace the cramped bridge. Her boots thudded softly against the grated floor. Mira, can we squeeze the Nomad through? Mira chewed her lip, fingers flying over the console. Holographic schematics bloomed in the air, the ship's outline weaving a ghostly path. Tight as a drum. I'd need to vent the forward bays, collapse the sensor array temporarily. Lose our eyes for the approach, but it'd shave off the width. She glanced up, eyes gleaming with that human spark, the one that turned impossible into done. Risky but doable. Your call, Cap. Kale's scales dulled to a muted blue, unease rippling across his form. This is not caution. The Concord advises retreat until the fleet arrives. Elara met his gaze steady. Fleet's 3 cycles out. Whatever's broadcasting that signal won't wait. She remembered the distress beacon from the last Vexery vessel, cut off mid-transmission, the crew's final words a garbled plea. No, waiting wasn't an option. Not with lives on the line, human or otherwise. Prep the vents, she ordered. Mira grinned faintly, already initiating the sequence. Alarms wailed as atmosphere hissed out, the ship groaning like an old beast rousing for battle. Elara strapped in, the harness biting into her shoulders. Kale, monitor the conduit. If it shifts, you yell. The Nomad lurched forward, thrusters firing in precise bursts. Debris loomed on the view screen, twisted metal, frozen vapor trails, rushing past in a blur. Without sensors, it felt blind, raw. A chunk the size of a shuttle clipped the hull, sparks erupting across the feed. Mira cursed, hands a blur on the controls, compensating with micro-adjustments. 10 meters to breach, Kale announced, his voice tight. The conduit yawned ahead, a jagged maw in the wreckage. Ilara's pulse thrummed. This was the grit of it, humanity's edge pushing where others pulled back. But as the ship slipped inside, the comms crackled to life unbidden. That voice again, serene and inexorable, "You'll understand soon." The words hung in the air, and for the first time, doubt flickered in Kale's eyes. The core awaited, pulsing with secrets that could bind the galaxy, or break it. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the console, her knuckles white against the humming metal. The bridge of the stellar drift felt smaller than ever, the air thick with the scent of overheating circuits and recycled oxygen. Outside the viewport, the nebula swirled in furious pinks and blues, but it was the pursuing shadows that clawed at her focus. 3 Krellian interceptors, their sleek forms cutting through the gas like predators scenting blood. "They're gaining, Cap," murmured Jax, her engineer from the auxiliary station. His fingers danced over the patched-together panel, coaxing the engines for one more burst. Jax was the cautious one, always calculating odds, but today his voice carried an edge of grit she'd rarely heard. "Shields at 42%. If we push the core again, we risk a cascade failure." Ilara nodded, not taking her eyes off the tactical display. The Krellians had ambushed them at the edge of the veil, those enigmatic aliens with their hive mind tactics and weapons that bent reality itself. What started as a routine salvage run had turned into a desperate flight after they'd stumbled on a derelict ship broadcasting that damned phrase, "You'll understand soon." The Krellians wanted it silenced, and they weren't asking nicely. "Divert auxiliary power to forward deflectors," she ordered, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Beside her, Dr. Lena Reyes, the xenolinguist who dragged them into this mess, leaned forward, her dark eyes sharp behind smudged glasses. "It's not just the signal," Lena said, her words clipped as she cross-referenced data on her tablet. "The phrase is embedded in their comms protocol. If we can isolate it." A jolt rocked the ship, alarms blaring as a disruptor beam grazed their hull. Ilara braced against the shake, tasting blood from where she'd bitten her lip. "Talk fast, Doc. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they board us." Lena's mind raced, piecing together fragments from the derelict's logs. The phrase wasn't a threat, it was a key, a linguistic anchor the Krellians used to synchronize their collective consciousness. Humans, with their messy individuality, might hack it, if they could mimic the pattern without losing themselves. Jax swore under his breath, rerouting power lines with makeshift welds. Sparks flew, illuminating his sweat-streaked face. "I've got an idea. Rig the comm array to broadcast a feedback loop. Bounce their own signal back at them, amplified through our human vocal modulations. It won't stop them, but it might scramble their link long enough for us to jump." Ilara glanced at him, a spark of hope cutting through the tension. Jax's ingenuity had saved them before, turning scrap into shields, whispers into weapons. But this? It was a gamble on the edge of madness. "Do it," she said. Lena, feed him the phrase patterns. "Make it sound like us, like we're the ones who finally get it." As Jax worked, the ship groaned under another hit. The nebula's glow painted eerie shadows across the bridge, and Ilara felt the weight of command settle heavier. They'd lost crew already, good people turned to vapor in the first skirmish. No room for error now. Lena murmured the phrase into the system, layering it with human inflections. A laugh here, a sigh there. The console lit up, frequencies warping as the broadcast fired. For a heartbeat, silence. Then the interceptors faltered, their formations breaking like shattered glass. One veered wildly, engines flaring in distress. "It's working," Jax breathed, a rare grin cracking his face. But Ilara's relief soured as a new alert pinged, reinforcements inbound, closing fast. The Gambit had bought time, not victory. And in the static of the comms, she swore she heard it echoing back, "You'll understand soon. Or a curse?" The dim glow of the emergency lights cast long shadows across the engineering bay, where Jax wiped grease from his hands and stared at the flickering console. The hyperdrive's core hummed erratically, a low thrum that vibrated through the deck plates like a warning. Elena stood beside him, her arms crossed, the weight of command etching lines around her eyes. "We've patched what we can," she said, voice steady despite the strain. "But if we push it now, we might tear the whole system apart." Jax snorted, leaning back against a bulkhead streaked with coolant residue. "Push it? Captain, that's not ingenuity, that's suicide with a side of sparks. The rift's pulling at us like a black hole's jealous lover. One wrong surge and we're confetti across the sector." He glanced at Zor, the alien engineer huddled over a secondary panel, its tentacles twitching with cautious precision. Zor's species, the Valari, prided themselves on methodical fixes, but even they couldn't ignore the failing seals glowing red on the display. The ship shuddered again, a deeper groan this time, as if the void outside was testing their resolve. Elena paced, her boots echoing in the confined space. The initial plan, reroute power from life support to stabilize the drive, had backfired spectacularly an hour ago, dropping oxygen levels to 70% and leaving half the crew lightheaded. Now, with the fuel reserves dipping critically low, every decision carried the sting of consequence. They weren't just fighting the ship, they were fighting time, the kind that turned allies into ghosts. Zor lifted its head, multifaceted eyes reflecting the console's warnings. The human way bold, yes. But the fractures propagate. We adapt or we fracture with them. Its voice was a soft chime, laced with the hesitation of one who'd seen too many vessels vanish into the rifts. Elena stopped pacing, her gaze locking on Jax. We adapt by thinking like them, Zor. The transmissions from the outpost mentioned anomalies, patterns in the interference. What if we sync the drive to the rift's pulse instead of fighting it? She jabbed a finger at the schematic where jagged lines mimicked the storm outside. Jax's eyes lit up, a grin cracking his weary face. Ride the wave? That's not just clever, that's poetry in plasma. But it'll fry the auxiliary coils. We lose those and navigation's blind. He pulled up the specs, fingers flying over the keys, the screen blooming with simulated trajectories. A sharp jolt rocked the bay, sending tools clattering to the floor. Alarms blared, red lights pulsing like a heartbeat. Impact. Elena braced against the console, her mind racing through contingencies. Close, Zor reported, tentacles coiling around a stabilizer. Debris field. The rift spits echoes, old wrecks pulled back. The alien's caution held, but there was a flicker of admiration in its posture, the way it watched Jax improvise a bypass. Jax worked faster, sweat beading on his brow. Give me 30 seconds. If this works, we surf out. If not, well, tell the galaxy we went out grinning. The core's hum steadied, then surged, the ship lurching forward into the chaos. Elena gripped the edge, heart pounding, as the view screen filled with swirling energy, a maelstrom of light and shadow that promised escape or oblivion. Through the din, a faint signal crackled over the comms, distorted but insistent. A voice human from the heart of the rift. You'll understand soon. It echoed, haunting, as if the void itself had learned to whisper secrets. The words hung in the air, unanswered, while the crew held their breath against the storm. Elena gripped the railing of the shuttle's observation deck, her knuckles white against the cold metal. Stars streaked past like fleeting thoughts, but her eyes were fixed on the holographic display flickering before her. The artifact loomed larger now, a colossal sphere of iridescent alloy suspended in the nebula's glow, whispering that damned phrase in a loop across every comm channel. You'll understand soon. It had been repeating for weeks, ever since their probe brushed its surface. And now, with the fleet's reinforcements delayed by a solar flare, it was just them, her, Jax and Lyra, against whatever Guardian protocols it had awakened. Jax slumped in the pilot's chair, his fingers dancing over the console with the frantic rhythm of a jazz pianist. Cap, the dampeners are holding, but that energy spike? It's like the thing's breathing down our neck. His voice carried that usual wry edge, but sweat beaded on his forehead, betraying the strain. He jury-rigged the shuttle's shields using spare parts from the cargo bay, a clever patch of human grit that had bought them time after their first docking attempt shattered the airlock seals. But time was bleeding out. From the adjacent lab pod, Lyra's voice crackled over the intercom, calm as ever, though Elena could hear the undercurrent of caution that defined the xenobiologist. The readings confirm it, the sphere isn't attacking randomly. It's testing us. The phrase isn't a threat, it's a key. But without the right resonance, we'll trigger another pulse. Lyra's species, the Vexery, had evolved on a world of harmonic storms, making her attuned to such subtleties. She'd argued against the brute force approach from the start, favoring subtlety over Elena's bold charges. Now, with the shuttle's hull groaning under the artifact's gravitational tug, her warnings felt prophetic. Elena pushed off the railing, her boots thudding against the deck as she strode to Jax. Options? We can't orbit forever. The nebulous tendrils clawed at the viewport, painting the cabin in shifting purples and blues, a beautiful cage closing in. Jax glanced up, his eyes sharp behind grease-streaked glasses. We could slingshot around it, use the momentum to scan deeper without committing. Risky, but it'd give Lyra time to decode that resonance pattern. He tapped the simulation, lines of trajectory weaving like threads in a loom. It was ingenious, turning the artifact's own pull into an ally, a human trick born of desperation and duct tape ingenuity. Lyra's feed showed her adjusting a crystalline analyzer, its facets humming faintly. Agreed. But if the pulse hits during the maneuver, it could fry our systems. We've lost 2 drones already, I won't lose this ship. Her tendrils quivered slightly, a vexury tell for unease, but she nodded at the hollow. I'll modulate the comms to mimic the phrase's frequency. It might mask us. Elena waited, the weight of command settling like nebula dust on her shoulders. The fleet's delay meant no backup, and the galaxy was watching. Every transmission of that sentence had sparked riots on colony worlds, whispers of apocalypse. They had to crack this, or the haunting would consume more than their mission. Do it. Jax, plot the course. Lyra, sync your analyzer to the engines. We're dancing with the devil today. The shuttle shuddered as Jax engaged the thrusters, engines roaring to life in a symphony of raw power. Elena braced against the acceleration, watching the sphere swell in the viewport, its surface rippling like water disturbed by an unseen stone. One pulse and they'd be adrift, one slip and the artifact's secrets would bury them. But as the ship arced into the slingshot, Jax's grin flashed, defiant, unbreakable. Hold on folks. Ingenuity's got a rhythm all its own. Lyra's voice cut through the hum. Resonance locked. It's responding. The analyzer's hum deepened, syncing with the sphere's whisper, and for a heartbeat the stars held their breath. Then the pulse came, not a wave of destruction but a gentle nudge guiding them closer. Elena's heart pounded. They weren't prey anymore. They were players in the game. But as the shuttle skimmed the alloy skin, a new alert blared, structural integrity dropping. The artifact wasn't yielding, it was pulling them in deeper into its core where the true test awaited. Jax cursed under his breath, hands flying to stabilize. Cap, this isn't a scan, it's a trapdoor. Elena nodded grimly, her resolve hardening. Whatever lay inside, they'd face it together, humans and vexury bound by the grit of survival. The phrase echoed once more in the comms, closer now, almost intimate. You'll understand soon. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the stellar Nomadus engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with static, the nebulous swirling gases mocking their stalled progress. Beside her, Lieutenant Crix, the avian first officer from the Coalition's fringe worlds, paced with feathers ruffled in agitation. This anomaly isn't natural, he hissed, his beak clicking sharply. The sensors show gravitational shear strong enough to crumple a dreadnought. We turn back now or we're adrift forever. Ilara didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed fixed on the anomaly ahead, a rippling tear in space, born from the ancient artifact they'd come to retrieve. The mission was Coalition-sanctioned, secure the relic before pirate scavengers did. But now with the Nomadus warp core flickering from overload, turning back meant failure, and failure meant the galaxy's endless whispers about that damned human phrase. You'll understand soon. It had started as a joke among crews, a cryptic taunt before pulling off the impossible. Now it haunted diplomatic channels, alien analysts dissecting it like a virus. In the engineering bay below, Mirachin wiped sweat from her brow, her hand steady on the console despite the alarms blaring. The witty engineer, always quick with a quip to cut tension, muttered under her breath as sparks danced from the exposed panel. Come on, you finicky beast. Don't bail on me now. Her plan had been simple: reroute auxiliary power to stabilize the core, using the nebula's ionized particles as a makeshift buffer. But the first attempt had backfired spectacularly, the feedback loop frying half the relays and leaving them with barely enough juice to maintain shields. If they pushed again, the core might breach entirely, turning the ship into a fireball. Yet retreat? That would leave the artifact for the Krell pirates, who'd weaponize it without a second thought. Crix's voice crackled over the intercom. Engineer Chen, status? The captain's holding course, but the shear's closing in. We have minutes. Mira glanced at the readouts, her mind racing through variables. Humans didn't fold, they adapted. She remembered the old stories, pioneers jury-rigging ships from scrap during the expansion wars. Grit, not genius, won those days. Tell her to buy me too, Mira replied, her voice steady. She yanked a conduit free, sparks singeing her glove, and began splicing it to the emergency thrusters. Risky. If the polarity inverted, it'd vent plasma straight into the bay. On the bridge, Ilara felt the ships groan as the anomaly tugged at them, like fingers clawing at the hull. Crix stopped pacing, his taloned feet scraping the grating. This is madness. The Coalition warned about human recklessness. That phrase, it's not bravado, it's a threat. Elara shot him a sidelong glance, her jaw set. She'd heard it all before. Aliens viewing human ingenuity as unpredictable chaos. But camaraderie bridged gaps, and Crix had stuck with her through asteroid storms and betrayals. It's trust, Lieutenant. In us. In what we can do together. The deck shuddered violently, lights dimming as another power surge hit. Alarms wailed, red strobes painting the bridge in bloody hues. Elara's fingers flew over the controls, easing them into a micro-jump to dodge the worst of the shear. It bought seconds, nothing more. Below, Mira sealed the splice, her heart pounding. Power reroute initiated. Hold on to your feathers. She hit the activation sequence and the core whined back to life, but not cleanly. Energy arced wildly, buckling a bulkhead with a metallic screech. Crix's eyes widened at the sensor spike. It's destabilizing. Elara evasive, but she was already moving, plotting a course that skimmed the anomaly's edge, using its own gravity as a slingshot. The Nomad bucked, inertial dampeners straining, as they hurtled toward the artifact's glow at the tier's heart. Mira whooped from below, adrenaline surging. We're in. But the core's at 120%, we've got one shot to grab it and punch out. As the relic came into view, a crystalline obelisk pulsing with forbidden light, Elara leaned forward, whispering to herself, "You'll understand soon." The words weren't a haunt, they were a promise. But the cost loomed. The backfire had cracked the hull, and venting atmosphere meant someone had to suit up for the retrieval. Crix met her gaze, resolve hardening his features. No speeches, just action. Together they'd claim it, or burn trying. Captain Elara Voss gripped the railing of the bridge, her knuckles whitening as the viewscreen flickered with static. The nebulous tendrils clawed at the hull of the stellar nomad, painting the sky in bruised purples and electric blues. Her crew, Jax, the wiry engineer with a perpetual smirk, and Lena, the sharp-eyed navigator whose caution bordered on paranoia, huddled around the console, their faces lit by the glow of failing readouts. "Shields at 30%, Jax muttered, his fingers dancing over the patched-together panel. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his voice held that gritty optimism humans were infamous for. "If we push the core another 10%, we might punch through this soup before it fries us." Lena shot him a glare, her dark hair matted against her neck. "And if it overloads? We're not some alien warship with redundant everything. One spike and we're vapor." She adjusted the thrusters with precise taps, buying them seconds, her cautious nature a anchor in the chaos. Elara nodded, her brave resolve stealing her features. She'd led them through asteroid fields and pirate ambushes, but this nebula was different. Alive, almost whispering through the comms in fragmented bursts. That sentence again, echoing from the distress beacon they'd chased, "You'll understand soon." It had drawn them here, a human-led salvage op turned nightmare, promising relics from a lost civilization. Now it felt like a trap. The ship shuddered as a plasma wave hit, lights dimming to emergency red. Alarms wailed, sharp and insistent. Jax cursed, diving under the console to reroute power manually. Sparks flew, singeing his sleeve, but he laughed through gritted teeth. "Come on, you stubborn beast. Humans built you to last." Elara leaned over the scanner, tracing the anomaly at the nebula's heart. A massive structure, half buried in cosmic debris, pulsing with energy signatures that defied their instruments. The challenge wasn't just surviving the storm, it was reaching it without the nomad tearing apart. Their early plan to skim the edges for data had backfired spectacularly, sucking them deeper into the maelstrom. Resources were low, oxygen recyclers straining, fuel cells dipping critical. "We adapt or we die," Elara said, her voice steady amid the groan of straining metal. She activated the manual override, bypassing safety protocols. "Lena, plot a slingshot trajectory around that gas pocket. Use the debris field for cover. Jax, overclock the inertial dampeners, give us a fighting chance." Lena hesitated, her fingers hovering. "That's risky. One wrong vector." "Do it," Elara pressed, meeting her eyes. Argument flickered there, but Lena complied, her caution yielding to trust. The ship lurched forward, engines roaring in protest. As they dove, the nebula parted like a curtain, revealing the structure. An ancient obelisk, etched with symbols that hummed in their minds. "You'll understand soon." The comms crackled again, clearer now, laced with a synthetic calm that sent chills down Elara's spine. Jax hooped from his station as the shield stabilized. "We're in. But look at that thing, it's scanning us." The obelisk's light bathed the bridge in ethereal white, probing their systems. Elara's heart pounded. This wasn't salvage. It was awakening something. The stakes sharpened. Escape with knowledge that could rewrite galactic history or become its next ghost. Lena's voice cut through the tension. Incoming pulse. Brace. The ship bucked, but they held, human grit weaving their paths together. Yet as the obelisk loomed larger, Ilara wondered if understanding came at a cost they weren't ready to pay. The galaxy watched, silent and vast, as the Nomad pressed on. The dim glow of the emergency lights flickered across the bridge, casting long shadows that danced like specters over the consoles. Elena gripped the armrest of her command chair, her knuckles white against the worn leather. The nebulous tendrils clawed at the hull, each pulse of ionized gas sending tremors through the deck. Jax hunched over the engineering panel, his fingers flying across the holographic display, sweat beading on his forehead despite the recycled air's chill. Structural integrity at 28%, Jax muttered, his voice steady but edged with that familiar bite. If we don't vent the core soon, this beauty's going to crumple like foil. Zor, the alien envoy strapped into the auxiliary seat, tilted his elongated head, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the chaos in fractured prisms. Human, your vessel defies logic. The collective simulations predicted total failure hours ago. Why persist? Elena shot him a glance, her jaw set. Because giving up isn't in the manual. She leaned forward, studying the scanner readouts. The rival fleet, those sleek, predatory ships from the Fringe Alliance, had hemmed them in, their weapons arrays charging for another salvo. The initial plan to slip through the nebula's eye had backfired spectacularly. The gas interfered with their shields, turning the safe passage into a gauntlet of fire. A low groan echoed from the bulkheads as another wave hit. Alarms blared, red strobes painting the room in bloodlight. Jax cursed under his breath, rerouting power from life support to the thrusters. Elena, we're blind here. Sensors are fried. One wrong turn and we kiss the void goodbye. She nodded, forcing calm into her voice. Options. Zor's claws clicked against his restraint harness. Surrender. The Alliance offers terms. Your ingenuity has intrigued them. But this defiance courts annihilation. Elena ignored him, her mind racing through the debris of failed tactics. The camaraderie that had bound her crew through a dozen crises felt thinner now, stretched by exhaustion. Jax had jury-rigged the engines twice already, buying them precious minutes, but the cost mounted, fuel cells depleting, hull breaches sealing one by one with dwindling patches. Wait, Jax said suddenly, his eyes lighting up behind the grime on his face. He pulled up a secondary schematic, the one they dismissed as too risky. The nebula's magnetic fields. If we polarize the outer hull, we could ride the currents like a sail. Slingshot past the blockaders. Zor hissed, a sound like steam escaping a cracked pipe. Reckless. The fields will tear your ship apart. Better than waiting for them to do it, Elena replied. She unstrapped, moving to Jax's side. Her hand steadied on his shoulder as she scanned the projections. The image burned in her mind, the Endeavor twisting through swirling violet storms, a fragile arrow against the cosmic tide. It was madness, but the alternative was surrender, and, with it, the secrets of human drive handed over like scraps. Make it happen, she ordered. Jax dove back in, his witty quips silenced by focus. Wires sparked as he bypassed safeties, the air thickening with ozone. Elena returned to her station, hailing the comms on a desperate frequency. No response from the Alliance ships, just the cold hum of targeting locks. The first jolt came as the polarization engaged. The deck bucked, throwing Zor against his straps. He let out a guttural cry, but Elena held firm, her gaze locked on the viewport. Plasma arcs lashed the shields, each one a thunderclap that rattled her teeth. Jax hooped as the ship surged forward, caught in the nebula's grip. We're doing it, he yelled, but his triumph cut short by a fresh alarm. A microfracture spiderwebbed across the main viewport, frost blooming from the stress. The slingshot veered, pulling them perilously close to the blockader's flank. Elena's heart pounded. One clever adaptation teetering on the brink. The Alliance vessels pivoted, their beams slicing through the gas like knives. She braced for impact, the weight of every choice pressing down. The lost crew from earlier skirmishes, the uncharted worlds they'd claimed through grit alone. Zor's voice broke through the din, strained but resolute. Your path, it illuminates. But the cost, later, Elena snapped, her fingers hovering over the manual override. The ship groaned onward, a testament to human stubbornness, hurtling toward the narrowing gap. Victory dangled just beyond the storm, but so did the abyss. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the helm of the battered shuttle, her knuckles white against the worn controls. The view screen flickered with static, but through the haze the alien armada loomed, sleek, predatory ships encircling the nebula's edge like wolves at a kill. Her crew, what was left of them, braced in the dim cockpit. Jax, the wiry engineer with his perpetual squint of determination. Mira, the sharp-tongued navigator whose optimism had frayed into grim resolve. And Dr. Hale, the xenobiologist whose calm analysis had kept them alive this long. "We've got one shot," Ilara said, her voice steady despite the sweat beading on her brow. The external challenge had started as a simple survey mission gone wrong, a resource shortage in the uncharted sector that drew rival scavengers, but it escalated when the Krell fleet mistook their human ingenuity for a threat. Now, with the shuttle's engines sputtering from an earlier sabotage backfire, the stakes were life or death. Lose here and the galaxy would whisper of humanity's folly, not its fire. Jax wiped grease from his hands, nodding at the jury-rigged device humming on the console, a makeshift EMP pulse, born from scavenged parts and Hale's wild theory on Krell shield harmonics. "It'll fry their sensors for a window. But if it overloads, we're space dust." Mira plotted the vector, her fingers dancing over the holographic display. "Nebula's our cover. Dive in, blind them, slip the noose. Simple." Her tone carried that wry edge, masking the fear that had haunted them since the Krell's first transmission. A chilling demand for surrender, laced with underestimation of these primitive humans. Hale leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the incoming signatures. "Remember what they broadcasted. You'll understand soon. That's us now. They think we're prey. Time to show teeth." The shuttle lurched as Ilara punched the thrusters, weaving through debris from their failed evasion plan earlier, a decoy drone that had drawn fire but cost them half their fuel. Alarms blared, red lights pulsing like a heartbeat. Short bursts of plasma scorched past, one grazing the hull with a shuddering groan. "Brace!" Ilara barked. Jax triggered the pulse. A low whine built, then erupted in an invisible wave. On the view screen, Krell ships stuttered, their formations fracturing as shields flickered out. Chaos rippled through the fleet, elegant hunters suddenly, adrift in confusion. Mira hooped, adjusting course. "We're through. Nebula incoming." They plunged into the swirling gases, colors shifting like living oil. The Krell's pursuit faltered, their comms erupting in alien static. Frustration, perhaps fear. Ilara exhaled, the tension coiling tight in her chest easing just a fraction. But victory wasn't clean. Scans showed the pulse had damaged their own systems. Life support was dropping and Jax's arm hung limp, burned from the overload. As they emerged on the far side, charting a course for the nearest human outpost, Hale patched into the emergency beacon. "They'll rebuild. But next time they'll hesitate." "That sentence? It's ours now." Ilara glanced back at her crew, faces etched with exhaustion and quiet pride. The galaxy had changed today, not with grand speeches but with grit and a gamble that paid off. Yet the cost lingered. A crippled ship, wounds that would scar, and the knowledge that understanding came at a price. The stars stretched ahead, vast and unforgiving, but for the first time they felt a little less alone.